Okay, we're going to need y'all to take a little break. You better hurry.
You got one more?
Huh?
Everybody needs one of those. Can you see the blue?
I've got a glare. That should work. I'm going at some point. Because I don't have anybody for the one person. He's got a new link there,
He's our one viewer. Okay, thanks. First one. Yeah. 5. Makes me 200 pounds.
Hey. Okay. Yeah. So I got only got about 4 people on here. What? You want me to wait? Yeah. I'm sorry, man. Okay. Well, just text me when you want me to start. How about that? Because I just totally redid it, and I had and I have no idea what happened. But yeah. We're ready. Just let me know, okay? Okay. No, mind that. He's gonna text me. When? He's gonna text me when to start. So you're gonna start on the phone.
We'll work through, explain what I've got up here, tell me what we're able to type in. He's expecting me to this one. Why is that? That's so question. So when you divide by 7, it gives me a round number where you can't have a round number stairs. Well, you can divide 6 and 40, it gives you 8 inches. When you divide 7, it gives you 6 and 7/8 for the rounds. And it's always a little scale size.
So you're gonna go over that, or you're gonna go over
Then we'll come over here. I'm actually showing you 3 methods of setting this up. One, I'm going to walk it off.
okay? I offer it to this.
Shoot.
After you go through that, you lay off that. Then measure something, like say, let's say this. And I've got to stay. Let's use this. And then flip that over. Maybe you work it with the lay it out. Well, it's the option what's in that. You got 10. And go back to seeing the ounce growth.
Yeah, we can do this. And I'm telling you, we're not going to this in 20 seconds. It took us longer to get the stupid door done.
Yeah.
Put it on.
Exactly. And it's there forever. Yeah.
You know, 60 boards is not that much to store. 60 boards is not that bad to store. Make sure the video is on.
Okay, go ahead and start.
It's the
Recording.
okay. So you're ready?
Wait, hang on one second. Edit. You.
Are you still going to do your update on this stuff? No. Are we going to cut and go over the different times for day section?
I think so.
We're going to do that after lunch.
Yeah, hang on one second. I don't know. To be honest with you.
I think that's better than
Well, we did look too. We just took it down so we could do it quick.
Hey, enable DVR. Oh, that's what I'm doing. It's on. It to the right should be on.
I see it. When I was in Carpenter School.
How do I record? Oh,
The code now says.
Okay. Okay. All right. Here we go. All right, bye-bye. Ready?
Yeah, here we go.
I think so.
All right.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Hey, construction teachers of Georgia, sorry we're coming on a little bit late and all the confusion. We've had some technical difficulties. We're going to blame it on the rain this morning. It's sunshiny out now, so we're going to blame it on the rain. But today we're going to talk about some stair layout, some stuff that you can do with your kids. I think it's important to start in the room with a whiteboard or a smart board or whatever you're using. You want to work with the math. And for just ease of use, let's just start with a 48-inch platform right here. And we're going to do the math on this. And so we're just going to dive right in. And so we have a 48-inch platform, and that's from the top of our finished floor to where we're going to finish our finished floor down here at the bottom. On your blueprints, it's going to be called FFE, and that stands for finished floor elevation. Sometimes it'll be FE, finished elevation, but more often not, you're going to see FFFE. So what we're going to do here is we're going to come up to 48 inches. That's our distance between finished floor to finished floor. 48 inches divided by 7. I always start with 7. It's just something I've always done. It's the way I was taught. 20 years ago when I was learning how to cut in stairs for the first time, you divide by 7, and that gives us a decimal right here. Well, we can't have 86% of a tread. It's impossible. So we can either round up or round down. And I always tell my students to do both because I want them to see this. If you round down and go with 6, you wind up with 8 inches per riser. If you round up and go with 7, you wind up with 6 7/8. Something that always needs to be taken into account is the old school method is between 17 and 18 inches. That is your tread and riser combination. And that makes for a very comfortable step. If you're like me and you got big feet, you want as wide a tread as you can possibly wind up with. And I never want to cut more than 10 inches here on my tread because I'll be cutting too much meat out of my 2x12. So we want our between 17 and 18 inches rise and run combined. The new code says no more than 7 3/4. Years ago we could go all the way up as long as between 7 and 8 inches. It was accepted by the code. Now it says no more than 7 3/4. So which it immediately eliminates this one. And so we have to do this. The code says now that we can go all the way down. In fact, last week or 2 weeks ago, I cut in some stairs that were 5 inches tall. So as long as it's no greater than 7 3/4, sometimes for if you're working with an elderly couple or a special needs application, you have to go less than 7 because some people can't raise their feet high enough. So now we come down to 7 7/8 per rise. All right, we're going to have 7 risers at 7 7/8 apiece, and that's pretty easy. As I come over here on the other side of the board, so I'm not in the way, and I've just drawn out crudely here. You will physically lay out 7 risers and 7 treads, which means if we have 7 treads at 10 inches apiece, we're going to have 70 inches of total run. We're going to need to remember that number in just a minute. Another thing that's important to do here is whatever material we're going to use for our treads and whatever material we're going to use for our risers needs to be deducted from the finished stringer. So down here at the bottom, if we're using 1.5 inches or 2x material, if we're building an outside set of stairs or we're using decking boards, we need to know the thickness. A decking board usually is about 1 inch, so we deduct that 1 inch from down here at the bottom. And we'd physically cut this away, and it would drop that down. Same way up here, whatever the thickness of our riser board is, if it's a 3/4 board, if it's a 1-inch deck board, or if you're using 2x material, you have to deduct that thickness and cut that away here. Let me show you why. Donnie, can you? With our risers, if I had an 1.5-inch board on top of here, and I've got my 6 1/8 cut, this bottom tread from my finished floor to the top of that tread becomes 8 3/8 of an inch. Then from the top of this one to the top of this one, because you've added 1.5 inches the whole time, it's going to be 6 7/8, 6 7/8 all the way up. And then when you get to your landing, or if either you have a step down or you finish flush, you'll be 1.5 inches too high here. This will be actually 1.5 inches less than 6 7/8. Same way with your riser boards. If I don't deduct the thickness from the back side of this stringer, you're going to have, this will be 11 inches if it's a 1-inch board, while the rest of them from face to face will be 10. You have to deduct those originally, or else the top and the bottom treads are going to be wrong. And that's something that's hard to stress to a teenager, and that's something that, you know, visually you have to show them, that I've found that I have to show them here, or they're going to miss the boat. I found that even with even young adults that I'm training to be carpenters, that they have a hard time understanding until you visually show them. So those are important, to always drop your stringer and always cut back the thickness of your riser at the top. So remember our 70 inches. Once we get this far, we've calculated what size our riser needs to be, how many risers we're going to have. We've figured out, depending on, we've established what material is going on these. In a framing application, of course, you're going to be putting temporary stairs on. You need to know what the finished tread is. We don't care if it's a little higher or low in a framing application just for temporary stairs, but what's going to be the finished product? Is it going to be a nice oak tread that's about 1 inch and 1.25 to 1 inch, depending on the manufacturer? We need to know that so we can deduct, we can drop our stringers, we need to know what's going on the front so we can cut them back so they become uniform all the way down. So once we've established all this, we've established what our height is, we've established our riser, how many risers, we know we have 70 inches of total run, we have 48 inches of rise, and so this is just Pythagorean theorem. So we have our rise, our run, we square those, and after we square them, we get our square root, and of course we come to 84.876 inches. Converted to feet, it's a little over 7 feet. Can't buy a 7'1" board, can't buy a 7'2" board, so you need to buy an 8-foot board. So this tells us what size material to buy. Make my students do this, and they have to actually purchase the material from me. They have to show up with a purchase list, not just a cut list, but a purchase list. And they only get to buy material from me one time. I do this for real-world application, and I do this because Skills USA, if you're doing the TeamWorks competition, you have to buy and order your material from the large pile that's out there at the TeamWorks competition. So now that we've done all the math, we've done all this math, and you know, this could take up to, depending on if you have 55-minute classes, this could take most of the period to work through, because I wouldn't have went, one, this fast, and two, I wouldn't have had all this work done for them. I'd have made the students find these answers, and we'd do them longhand together, because me giving them is not going to help. But I just wanted to show you a quick run through of what I do in my board with my students, and I want to show you something really cool that Dale Hale has showed us. I know he showed us at Camp T&I once before, but this is a whiteboard attached to a 2x12. Now you can do this out of 2x4s, 2x6s, and you can make a class set of each set of material. You get about 20, 25, or depending on how you want to group your students. This is great because I can write on here, this is Wade's
stare. And if I did this on the other side, it'd be forever. But now I can just wipe this away and I can start over. It's great for a teaching purpose. Usually if I'm laying these out in the real world, I'm using a crisp. I sharpen my carpenter pencil right before I get started because I want nice crisp lines as I'm drawing out my stringers. But for the purpose of using on a marker board and just practicing, the chisel tip on a Expo marker works just fine. Some things that I show my students, a couple different ways to, I've had people tell me before, I just hold the 6 3/8 and 10, I hold it with my fingers. And that works good. But you have to be really careful about doing that. You have to make sure that you're holding the same time. Or if you're just going to hold down and lock it down. This is the old school way of doing it. You clamp a straight board on 6 7/8 and 10. I can hold it down here. I make my mark. I slide down. I'm going to continue that mark out. I slide down. I come to my next one. I slide down. Oh no, I've hit this sawhorse right here. That's one of the reasons I don't like these. Also, it's not extremely portable. So it was a great method in the old school, but in terms of being practical, hard to do. So again, I can erase this. I can start over. That's the beauty of this. It gives students tons to practice on. What came along years later, and these are the first set of, I call them stair buttons. Some people call them rafter gauges. These are the first set I ever bought when I was learning to be a carpenter. They work great. I can keep them in my tool belt. I lock them down, and I can put them down here, and I can mark them. And the great thing is, I can keep going, and I don't hit anything. The downside is I'm only picking up about 1/4 of an inch or less in material. What I have recently found, and you can find these are made by Square Jig, and no, we're not sponsored by them this year, but these have 7/8 of an inch projection on the bottom side, which is over half the thickness of a 2x. Gives me more meat to bite to. If you're like me, you've noticed that lately the lumber has become worse and worse and worse that we're getting from our lumber yards. And so if you've got a bark 2x12, it's really hard to get a good edge. So this lets you go past the bark. And of course, when you're picking your pattern, you want to pick your straightest board, your cleanest board, no barked edges. So let's lay one of these out. Like I said, I like these stair buttons right here, and especially these at the extended depth. It gives me the accuracy of the straight edge 2x with the convenience of the buttons. Like I said, I like these. I've been using them for a few months now, and I don't see myself going back. So this is a 10-foot 2x12. We went and ordered it from the lumber rack behind us. But we can lay one out and show you the advantage of this whiteboard. I think, especially with budget cuts coming this year, I think we've got to be more conscientious than ever with our money. And this is something that a little bit of investment on the front end for some practice boards. But Dale's had his for years. Donnie Holmes here at Georgia Northwestern, many of you know him. He's had his for years. I think he told me 8+ years, and he saved himself thousands of dollars by ordering material at one time. So let's just mark out our first set. And I like to number mine to keep me to. And a great application for this whiteboard, especially if you want to talk about differentiation. So you give you've done all the math for the kids together. A group of students have excelled, and they have completed this project and laid out this board, and they've done it correctly early. You can quickly change and give them something else where they have to figure everything by themselves. Come down here. and 7. Now, a couple things we can do here. The old school method, we take off the stair buttons and then we would lay it back over and make our marks to drop our stringer. Instead, I'm at 6 7/8. Whatever thickness we want to have here for our risers or treads. Usually it's going to be a 2x, so I'm just going to mark 1.5 inches up on my framing square. Then I can just flip this over and not have to worry about now. You just cut this off. So take it like that. The only downside of the whiteboard is you got to be careful not to rub your marks up. But now I've dropped my stringer, 1.5 inches. I'll come up here and do the same thing. So if I'm using a 3/4 inch 1x, I'm going to mark 3/4 of an inch. I'm going to do the same thing here. Now everybody meet Pat. I've made my pattern. I'm going to, if this is a real 2x and we're building a real set of stairs, I'd cut this out, I'd set it up, I'd double check everything, make sure I liked it, and then I'd use this over and over again. When I cut my stringers, I do not overcut here. I don't extend my lines past with my saw. I feel it weakens it. The board's going to break in a path of least resistance. One thing I come back with my jigsaw and I clean that up. If I need to, I clean it up even more with my chisel. But it doesn't take that much longer than overcutting, and it makes a much stronger board. A couple things. There's been the argument lately, I'll use a 2x10. 2x10s are generally between 9.5 and 9 3/4 of an inch. If I took off 1 3/4 of material, this is 11 1/8 inch, this 2x12. If I took off 1 1/4 material extra, that means I'm 1 1/4 further back. So let's just mark that real fast. That's where my cut would come to. That's how much meat would be left versus that much. Another reason I'd rather overhang and then have this wider. Most treads, if you buy them at Interior Trim Supply, JB Millworks, whatever trim, that's what's close to us here in North Georgia, whatever's the closest for you that you would buy your interior treads at, you'll find that they come over 11 inches. Usually about 11 1/2. Some are less than that, depending on the manufacturer. But it gives you an overhang and still gives you that full depth, but without sacrificing the meat of your 2x. The other thing that's becoming more and more popular for interior stairs is LVLs. They're straight, they're perfect, they're true. The only downside to LVLs is the cost, but they're getting closer and closer to 2x all the time. Let's see. We cut all this out. I'm not going to cut this because we had a slight earthquake.
I want to add something to you.
Okay. Well, come on, Dale, because I'm fixing to erase this.
Guys, Wade was talking about this meat, and I just wanted to add something that I do when I get over. When I get over 6 steps, after I cut this, I'll add a 2x4 right here on the bottom to give it a little more strength on each one of those stringers. So if I got 13 steps, it's going to have this 2x4 of it also.
Absolutely.
I just add a little meat to it because you get some big people like me and Wade on these. I just like to beef it up a little bit and add a 2x4 on those stringers. Just something that I do. You may want to do it, you may not.
Well, and Dale, that brings us to another good point. The code says now that a lot of guys used to toenail these in, and that's never been strong. And they toenail the bottom in. I use pressure blocks. I cut a block at whatever my spacing is, and I'll cut 2x4s in between. So if here's my one stringer, here's another stringer, here's my third stringer, I'll cut blocks in between and nail everything together so it becomes a real solid piece. And I do the same thing top and bottom. And if I've got 3 stringers, I'm setting it as a whole unit.
Right. Good job.
So
What is the manufacturer of the?
this is square.jig.com.
Okay.
Like I said, not a paid advertisement. They're expensive, but golly bum, they're worth it. I think Tim used them last week. We were cutting in stringers at his house. He seemed to like them enough where I had to beat him up because he'd taken them from him. But I'm showing you the beauty of this. Now, I've wiped this away, and here we are. We can start over. And if a kid had made a mistake, whether in the layout or in the math, if you're using if I was using the other side of this 2x, I'd have to sand it off. Go get the 80 grit paper, spend 15 minutes sanding it off. Eventually, you're going to wind up with a piece of paper if you do that over the years. This, I take my dry erase mark board, clean it up, it's done. A couple other things that Dale showed us. Let me grab one for you. And if you watch the video that's been posted to Donnie Holmes' construction page, you'll see Dale using this to demonstrate a rafter. Mo, would you grab this 2x12 and set it out for me? My Vanna wife here today. Thank you, sir. So you can make these in, you can have a set of those 2x12s, you can have a set of 2x4s and a set of 2x6s. Here's another activity that we like to do. Let me grab my speed square. I got my tape measure. We got a window, and let's say it's 4 foot to the, or let's say 5 feet to the center of the window. I can actually have my kids practice laying out doors and windows, just straight wall plate, 16 inches on center. So I can actually, let's call this a door. It'd be easy. It'd be something quick and easy the kids would start with. So my door is 5 foot off the edge. So now I can come here and I can lay out from that center mark. Let's call it a 3/0 door, which means we need to have 5 inches more, which is 41 for our header. And so half of 41 is 20 and a half. I'm going to set my tape on 20 and a half to that center mark. And again, excuse these wide marks, but practice, the kids can get better at making the marks with a pencil. But for the practice method, if they're within the thickness of a dry erase marker, that's closer than most kids are starting out in occupational safety and interior construction anyway. So I'm going to make a mark down here at 41, make a mark at the end of my tape, and that's going to be my jack stud, trimmer stud, whatever you want to call it, JX, and then I have my king stud and I mark KX. Now I have there's the debate that goes around, should I just make 1 mark here or should I make 2? Anytime I'm laying out plate with students, I make all the marks. So I'm going to make all my marks here, and I show them that if your speed square has got a little, can you see that on camera, Donnie? That little triangle right there, that's 1.5 inches, which is the most, that means from this edge right here to there is 1.5 inches. You can actually line that up on your lines, and you never have to pick your square out. Or, I'm sorry, pull your tape out. So I mark 1.5 inches there, flip my square over, and I mark 1.5 inches. I know that's a lot of lines, and if it was us framing it as adults who've been doing it a while, it wouldn't be a big deal. And of course, for speed, we just make the mark, make 1 line. Of course, we build our headers and everything as a unit anyway. Excuse me. But to show the students, to get it in their minds, to beat it in their heads, I like to show all the lines because when they see it visually, it helps them tremendously. Now I'm going to come through here. I'm going to mark 16 inches on center. on this board. And a lot of guys will mark 15 1/4, drive a nail at this point. What I've found easiest and saves me the most time is I just look at the red square. It's easily marked. That's my 16-inch mark, and I just come back 3/4 of an inch. And the reason I lay my door out first is so I can put a CX or a C here, and I know that these are not going to be full-length 2x. And I don't have extra marks. You see where this stud would have wound up right here in between my jack studs. Then I'd have had extra marks there. I always like to lay out my doors and windows first. And now my students, they've got to practice doing all of this. Still lay this out, both sides, because they need the studs need to be continuous all the way through in case the drywall breaks on the top of the header. And again, like I said, I like to do the double lines here. It takes a little more time. It's not what we do in the field, but it shows that kid, he doesn't get confused. It shows that student exactly where they need to put this stud. I had somebody one time, I was laying out wall plate, and I was putting my mark, drew a line, set an X. Oh, I thought you wanted me to put it over here because you had an X here. Apparently he'd never watched a pirate movie because X always marks the spot. So to eliminate all that confusion, especially if you're building sheds or dog houses or whatever, if you've laid something out that you want to be right, you're going to sell it, or you're giving it to somebody, or it's going to be something that's going to not practice, but it's going to stay forever. If you've got your back turn working with another student or supervising the table saw or the miter saw, you don't have to worry about the student who's putting 2x4s on the lines. Or in this case, it'd be 2x6s. So we've done a door activity. We could easily erase this and do a window activity. We can demonstrate how to lay out the corners, and that if I had 2 of these and I had one intersecting here, that I would, when I lay out and I pull, that I would actually start from this side or burn 3.5 or 5.5 inches, whatever the thickness of my wall plate was. It's just good visual representation of what we're doing. Anybody have a question typed in the comments, Donnie, that we might need to answer? Something that needs to be clarified? Did we go through something too fast?
Right now, it was just the stair gauge.
The stair gauge?
Yeah.
They cost about $30. But I think the regular buttons cost $14 or $15. So, and they're nice shiny blue. So if you like the color blue, I think the more accurate we can get in anything we do, the better off we are.
I think that's it.
I was
I
just
don't
saying,
have any questions.
any other questions? Well, we said we would do one live, and so Donnie's idea was we'll take the floor to the top of this marker board. We're going to do a stair live. And so we're actually going to measure this physically, and we're going to pretend all this is our finished floor. We're at 35.5. I'm going to erase all this, and we'll work through this since we've got a little bit of time. We do have some time, don't we, Donnie?
Yep.
Okay, good. So let's work this. First thing I want to do, because I'm getting forgetful as I get older, 35.5. That's my finish. That's going to be top of, that's FFE. I'm going to write down that somewhere on my board. And then I'm going to start with 35.5, converts easily. I'm going to divide that by 7. Like I said, I always like to start with 7. And I'm going to, I encourage the students to get a construction calculator, but if they don't have one, I don't hold that against them. So I'm going, I tell them you can use the free calculator that's on your phone. And if you do the math, it works out to 5.071. Now, I always go to 3 decimal places and tell them in this 5th decimal place, in this case it's 4 if you're doing the math on me at home, I use this to either round up or round down with. The reason I like to go with 3 decimal places, especially when you're dealing with, if we were dealing with feet instead of inches here, you're dealing with tenths of a foot. If you're just rounding up or rounding down, you could definitely decrease or increase your measurement on a stair or a rafter by 1/8 inch, 1/4 inch by not going at least to 3 decimal places. So I always like 3 decimal places. Again, we said you can't have part of a stair, so we can either round up or round down. I know if I round down, I'm going to be a little bit less than 7 right here. So if I use 5, it's going to work out, or it's going to be, I'm sorry, a little bit more than 7. So we divide this by 5. That works out to be about 7.1. That's inches
Right, a little bigger.
per riser.
Right, a little bigger.
Bigger? I'm sorry. That's the first person in my life that's told me to write bigger. Is that big enough?
That's big enough. Absolutely.
Well, make sure you guys can see it. So we got 7.1. Well, how do we convert this? One of the things I stress to my students is knowing the first things I want them to know. I tell this in my occupation, say 0.25 is a quarter, 0.5 is a half, 0.75 is 3/4. I said, once you master those, I said, you can work on the 1/8 of an inch. 0.125, was it 375, 0.625, and was that 875. And this is, now we know 1/8, quarter, 3/8, half, 5/8, 3/4, and 7/8. These 3 they should know. If not, don't take change from them when they're working at the McDonald's cash register. If they don't know that 0.5 is half a dollar, I'm really worried about them. But I make it about money. Because that way they can remember that 0.25, 25 cents, that's 1/4. 0.75, that's 3/4. So I want them to understand that, and if they can get these 3, they can kind of work on the rest of them. So 0.1, that's incredibly close to an 1/8. A 1/16 is 0.0625 is a 1/16. And we're much closer to an 1/8 of an inch than we are a 1/16 of an inch. So 0.1, if you're doing this on a construction calculator, it would automatically round to an 1/8. So we're going to convert this. We've just converted it mathematically. So we're at now 7 1/8. So we're going to have 5 treads at 7 1/8. I'm sorry. Right, risers. We're going to have 5 treads too. So now we've done the math. Well, we still need to know what's length board to order. Well, if we have 5 risers and 5 treads and they're coming out 10 inches apiece, that means we have 50 inches. We take our 35.5 and we're going to do Pythagorean theorem. We need to square both these. So, easiest way to do it, again, a free calculator on your phone does all this for you. So you don't have to know all the math. And this is 1. You add those together, you'll get 3,760.25. Square root of that gives us 61 inches, 3, 2, it's 0.8, so I'll make that 1. Now this is inches. If I call Lowe's today and I said, I need a 62-inch board, they're going to laugh at you. It's kind of like if you order concrete by the cubic foot. So convert this to 12, easily divide this by 12, becomes 5.11007. Can't order a 6-foot board, but you can use a 2x12 that's 12 foot long, as long as you cut carefully. You should be able to get that. Definitely get 2 out of a 16-footer. So we'd order you at least order an 8-foot board, or you could order 16-foot boards, or if you felt really comfortable, you could get it out of a 12-footer. So now that we've done the math, let's come over here and we'll reset our stair gauge. I want to show you how easy this is to reset. Bo, I know I told you to move that, but I can get my 2x12 back. So I'm going to move this to 7 1/8. It's going to stay at 10. It's staying at 10. Like I said, I always like to have it at 10. Thank you, Dale. Thank you, Bo. So we need 5 risers and 5 treads. We'll come down through this again and just go the same way. It's the exact same way. Nothing changes. 1, 2. Dale, you said if you go over 6, you'd like to put a 2x4, right?
Yes.
So at 5, you're not going to.
No.
Okay. Here we are at 5. Let me finish off my tail. What thickness tread are we going to use? Anybody comment? One of the guys here.
5/4 board.
You use a 5/4 board. They usually run an inch. They're supposed to be 1 1/4 inches, but they're almost always 1 inch. That's going to be our tread. Now I'm dropped. What's going to be we're going to use a 5/4 board up here. We're going to use a 3/4 board. We're going to use a 3/4 board up for our risers. And the reason we're doing this, I know a lot of us, if we're using 5/4, that means we're guaranteed to build a deck, right? Well, the sad part is the code says now you can have no more than a 4-inch pass through in the exposed of a stair stringer. The reason is the baby's head wouldn't get stuck if it's less than 4 inches. Same way on our code on our spindles. There's my eraser. So now I'm going to take my eraser saw, and now I've cut everything off. And now again, a visual representation. Dale, can they see this end?
Yes.
Okay.
Turn
So-
the board up one time.
You want to turn it up? Okay. That'd be the easiest way yet. All right. So now you can see this, and if we held it up like this, that's how it would look going in. But if I'm right here, I'm at 6 inches, 6 1/16. And right here, of course, that's the off because of the thickness of the chisel point. We're at 7 1/8.
Turn your tape for the other numbers.
I'm sorry. So right there, you guys, you have 7 1/8. Right here, you have 6 1/8. So we dropped 1 inch. Once I put my decking board on here, this is going to be up to 6 1/8 again. If I take my blue shirt, blue marker, I put my 1 inch board back on top of here. This is now at 6 1/8 or at 7 1/8 again. If I put my 1 inch board on here again, you measure from here to here, will still be 7 1/8 because the amount that you moved up here, you've moved the same here. You only have to notch the bottom. You only have to set back the top. Same way here. If I notch 1 inch or notch 3/4 here, this is 3/4 of an inch less than 10, so it's 9 1/4. I add my 3/4 board back here, it's 10 again. And when I add my 3/4 board here, from here to here is 10. And all the way down. It'll be 10, 10, 10, 10, 10. And it'll be 7 1/8 all the way up now that we've dropped it and cut it back. So you'll have equal stairs every time that your customer is just in love, just by some simple math. Stairs aren't hard. It just takes a little bit of prep work. And knowing how to do the math. If you can figure a rafter, you can figure a stair. And again, it's now gone. If I flip over and use the blonde side of this board without the marker board on it, I write, Wade's board. That's forever on here until we take sandpaper off. It doesn't come off.
Tell them where you can buy the material, like 4x8 sheets.
Of this?
Yeah, tell them the process. It comes 4x8 sheets.
Well, yeah, okay, so this marker board, it comes in 4x8 sheets. Can you see the seam on the camera? I don't know if you can or not.
Yeah.
This 10-foot board. You can seam these together. For the process of practicing, it's not going to hurt anything. We ripped this on the table saw at 8 o'clock today and had it on here, by 8:05. We had this glued, stapled on, with some narrow crown staples in here to hold it till the glue dries. And the glue's probably set up close enough now, this board's never going to come off. Buy 4x8 sheets, you can buy them. Your CTA department can get them for you pretty easy.
So I'm making those boards out of plywood.
What these?
Instead of 2x.
Yeah, if you don't want to, and we talked about that. We talked about that last week. The 2x6 over here is pretty twisted, and it wasn't when it was originally put together. But as it's dried and as it's been stored, if it's not stored perfectly flat, it's going to twist. If you want perfect boards, you can buy a 4x8 sheet of 3/4 CDX plywood, and then you can glue and laminate the whiteboard on top of there, and then rip it at one time on the table saw. Make a 2x4, make 2x6s, make 2x12s. You can still do them separately if you'd like to, but it doesn't have to be. It'll also save on storage. It'll save on weight. Won't be something so heavy to carry around. Won't be something so heavy you got to store. Because at the end of the day, sometimes we're left picking up the pieces, especially after when we went on lockdown for COVID. Every one of us, I'm sure, had our shops tore up and ready to work Monday morning. So we're the ones left putting things back together. So the lighter, the lighter I can make it, the better off I am. So, Donnie, where did you get your whiteboard at? Office Depot sells it.
Home Depot.
Home Depot sells it.
Yeah, just 4x8 sheets. It's up maybe $10 a sheet, something like that, if that.
So this 2x12 costs probably close to $15, $20 right now, depending on what part of the country or part of the state you're in. Whiteboard's $10. You can make probably at least 4 of these out of one sheet of whiteboard.
Yep.
Out of a 2x12. At least 3. So you make 3 out of a sheet of whiteboard for less than $100. You've got 4 or 5. And
Just the black Expo markers and erasers. All that stuff's on state contract.
yeah.
So
This stuff, I don't know how everybody's department is, but we've got a big cubicle. We get all our supplies in. No questions asked. I can go grab a bunch of Expo markers, a bunch of erasers. We've got extra whiteboard stored. The whiteboard, the erasers, the markers don't even have to come out of your construction budget. The only thing that would have to is the actual material itself, and you buy that one time. You set it up little by little each year. This year I'm going to build the 2x10s or the 2x12s. So.
Guys, just to add to this a little bit, just what I found in my classroom, I think this is what we're all looking for in our classroom is the engagement of all students. This is a way to get every student that you have in your classroom engaged. It doesn't cost anything once you get your board set up. You starting an intro. I start this process, and we practice this process throughout their throughout the time they're in my class, whether they're in intro or carpentry one, both of them, they get to do this. And it's just helped me manage my classroom, because before, if we were laying out walls, I had one kid doing it on a 2x4, and the rest of them standing around watching. This way, it's enabled me to be able to engage all my students. And that's made my classroom management so much easier. I hope that Wade done a superb job on demonstrating this. I hope this is something that is valuable to y'all. We thought it was important. We talked about it last week, and Donnie and Wade and I and Tim, and we thought this layout, you spend weeks with your kids on this layout and never actually have to cut anything. And when they practice this, then you assign them to build a wall. 99% of the time, you have a really good outcome of your students being able to assemble and do the layout correctly. It's been a big plus to my program, and I hope that it helps you in your program and engaging your students. Thanks, Wade. I think you've done a super job. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan.
Next session's at 1 o'clock.
Next session, 1 o'clock. It's right here on the board for anybody who can see it. Our visually impaired students, we're saying it. It's at 1 o'clock this afternoon. So, you want this blue one?
If y'all was impressed, please let me tint your hair, just let me tint the gray a little bit. The night they
Okay, we are live.
We're live?
Yep.
Hi. Guys, sorry about us telling you that the next session was at 1. That was a misunderstanding on our part, and I apologize for that. Later on today, Donnie's going to send out a video that we made last Thursday that goes over the math calculations, how to estimate rafter lengths, how to cut your bird's mouth cut, your plumb cut, as far as rafters are concerned. We made a video. It's pretty good. I'm not going to say I didn't have some thought process when we were making that, but it's pretty good. What I wanted to show you today is that we're going to go ahead and do a live hands-on. We have a structure here behind us. I've set 2 rafters on each end. We put the ridge board in, and I'm just going to kind of walk you through on what we've done to create this scenario. This is a little smaller than what I really like to work with, but it'll work. On the video that you will see that Donnie's going to send out, the YouTube video, we used a 48-inch wide structure, and we estimated the rafter length. So I've got those lengths. I am going to go over what we've done as far as the layout goes and the way that I do that. I start off with a plumb cut at the top of I'm going to use the whiteboards too that Wade had, because I've already cut all the rafters, and I'm going to show you what we've done. I'm not going to cut the rafters. We only have an hour here. I'm going to try to get the roof on this piece during this hour. So the plumb cuts, the first thing I do, I'd mark a plumb cut at the top of the board. I would take my saw, I'd cut this, then I'm going to mark my other 2 plumb cuts. One's for the rafter length, and then the other one's for the overhang. So on the rafter length, minus the ridge, and it talks about subtracting the ridge in the estimating the rafter length. I do want to show you this form. Tim's going to send this out. If Donnie can get a little bit closer. This is what I use for the students to estimate their rafter length. This includes the deduction on the ridge, all the information that you need as far as estimating the rafter. This form works really well when you're teaching kids to estimate rafter length. Okay, so on the plumb cut, after we deducted the ridge, the length of these rafters that we cut were 25 1/4. So after I cut that piece up there, or if I put it just on the line, I marked it off the point, so it goes to 25 1/4. I'm gonna mark 25 1/4, and then we use a 6-inch overhang. And I told you if you had an open rafter tail, I'd leave it at 6. I'd mark it for 6. If I was using, gonna put a rough face on it, I would deduct 1.5 inches for your 2x4. So we deducted 1.5 inches. So the total length of this thing should have been 36 3/4. Is that correct? Excuse me. Let me back up because I'm looking at the whiteboard over here, and that was for a 12-inch overhang. So if I was going to do this and using a 5/12 pitch, and I wanted 6 inches of overhang, I would just add 6.5 inches to it. So 25 1/4 and 6.5 would be 31 3/4. So those would be the 2 points. So I take my speed square, rotate it to my 5/12, make my mark, come to for the overhang. I did not deduct for a rough fascia. This is for an open rafter tail. So what I do next? On the bird's mouth, I use the same square gauges that Wade used. I put it at 5 and 12. Slide it here. I come to the 8.5 inch mark. And the reason that I do that, I want 3.5 inches. And if I get Donnie to zoom in on this rafter that we've already cut, you can see here that 3.5 inches 3.5 inches will set right on top of that cap plate or your double top plate, however you want to say it. And it comes out perfectly. This will work up to about 8/12 pitch. Once you get past that, you want to change it a little bit. Because you should have 2/3 of the board should be here. And once you go past an 8/12, you start taking more than 2/3. You need 2/3 to support this overhang on your rafters. So at 8/12, you're going to have to change it. I checked it the other day. It works pretty good up to an 8/12. We use it from a 4/12 to an 8/12. This works great. You may use something lower than a 4/12 sometimes if you're doing a lean-to off of a barn or something, but traditionally a 4/12 is about as small as we go. So this is why I do that. 3.5. So 8.5 on this framing square. If I come to 8.5 and put it on my plumb cut mark, that will give me 3.5 inches to set on my cap plate or double top plate, however you refer to it. It doesn't matter to me. Okay, so that's my rafter. I cut that out, and we're ready to go there. We already deducted for the ridge, so here it is. This is what we got. All right, Donnie, if you don't mind, if you'll roll over here on this side, I want to talk a little bit about this ridge. This is actually not even nailed. Okay, a couple things here. This is the ridge board. We use the 2x6, and I know some of you are probably saying it requires, if you use a 2x6, 2x8 should be used as a ridge. I'm good with that. We just had some scrap lumber. We used what we had here today. We didn't have any 2x8s. But even if it's a 2x8, I do the same thing. Depending on what kind of fly rafter or barge rafter that we're going to use, out on the edge here, this is a 2x6, and this is just one of my rafters that would set out here for your overhang. If it's a 2x6, you have to notch it lower. If it's a 2x8, you'd have to get this measurement. I do this before I set the rafter up there. I'm going to probably not be in the video here for a second. I'm going to get a 2x4 rafter so I can show you exactly what it should look like. This is your 2x4. It's referred to as a fly rafter or a barge rafter. And I notched this ridge in order to compensate for this barge rafter. I want this to be a solid board. If possible, I don't want to come out here on the end and try to piece this. If I'm going to break it, I'm going to break it back there somewhere probably 6 foot back in my rafters. So that's what it should look like. This is your fly rafter, or some people refer to it as a barge rafter. In the book it says both. So if this was a larger structure, I would also notch this out and run some stiffeners horizontally. One of the other guys this morning told me they refer to it as a barge ladder, where they just cut these braces in to support this board on the overhang. We didn't cut those in today. If you'll look in your books, it talks about notching out where you can lay a 2x4 back in, and it ties into this second rafter, and you notch this here. I usually do that every 4 feet, what I usually do. So depending on how long your rafters are, depends on how many stiffeners that you put in. I call them stiffeners. Some people call them barge ladders, whatever you want to call them. They help support this fly rafter and barge rafter. Okay. We went ahead and what I traditionally do, I usually don't set the rafters and the ridge first, and I'm going to get a couple guys to come over here. They're going to set all the ceiling joists, and I'm going to talk a little bit about them before we get started. I've got a couple here because I'm going to show it to you on whiteboard. The way that I do this is your ridge cut. I call it a ridge. It's a pitch cut. I usually do this, I'll take my square, when I'm gonna do these pitch cuts to dog ear, these ceiling joists, I'll usually take my square, instead of using 5/12, I'm gonna use 24 and 10. That's what I usually do. You can do it a couple of different ways, but I'll use 24 and 10, and I'll mark this. This is for my pattern. I'll mark this 24 and 10, and then I'll take my speed square. This is the way I mark these ends. The thickness of this, I usually just cut them at 3.5 inches. That's what I do, and mark it just because it's 2x4. And that'll give me plenty of clearance. And I'll show you in a moment. This may be down below your rafters just a little bit, but I want them below my rafters. I don't want it sticking up or cause a hump in my roof. So 3.5 always works good. I just make it a 2x4. So this is what this looks like. This is one that's cut for this particular building. So you see it's pretty close. Then I would just cut that out, then I'd measure down here whatever length my ceiling joist is and duplicate the same process on the other end of the board. So then my ceiling joists are cut. I know we're talking about rafters, but this is part of the installation process. So the next thing that I would do if I was building a roof on whatever structure, if I was stick framing a house, I'd set all my ceiling joists. We're not going to talk, there's a few other components that we need to talk about. Maybe we can talk about them later on. If you're stick framing, you got to put your strong back in, your collar beams, and we're not going to get into all those parts today. There's just not enough time to do that. But we are going to set the ceiling joists. I want to show you how I nail those. Maybe you do it a little bit different. I nail on one side and on the end on my ceiling joist because I'm going to set my rafters right beside them and I want those to sandwich up really well. So if Donnie will come on around over here, I'm going to get these guys to set the ceiling joists for me. And I will also Are you good, Donnie?
Yep.
All right, guys. Here, if you'll look on this top plate, if Donnie can, I'll try to do this. I'm going to put this alphabet. The layout alphabet, some people do things differently. They may have a different way of marking their alphabet. As long as whoever's working with you, y'all have the same alphabet, it really doesn't matter. Wade showed you a way that he does it. Marks his king post or king stud and his trimmers. He puts a J. All I do is put an X and a T. So you just need to learn whatever alphabet you're using for as your layout alphabet is concerned. Just make sure everybody knows what your layout marks are. So when I'm laying out a roof system, I use an X for my common rafter, and the J is for my joist. You could put CJ for a ceiling joist. I just put a J and an X. Some people put an X and then just put a mark like that on one side. Just a straight mark. I've seen that. It's however you want to do that. Just make sure that your students or whoever you're working with have the same alphabet. So what I usually do, I'll set this. And the reason I like to set my ceiling joist first, it's easier. It's just part of the process. And then it also, as far as the width of whatever you're covering with your ceiling joist, it also keeps them true and keeps your walls from pushing out when you put your rafters on and you get your ridge board. It doesn't let the roof push the walls out. So even if you're building a storage building and you're not going to put any ceiling joists in, I would recommend that go to the center. I'd put one ceiling joist in the center just to keep it from kicking your walls out. Then once you get it put together and get your collar beams at the top, you can take that ceiling joist out. Or you can leave it. But if you want the open shed like on a cathedral, somewhere you got to keep these walls from pushing out while you're building that roof and getting your collar beams in. Otherwise, it'll have a dip right in your ridge up here. This ridge ought to be perfectly straight. If you're building a 30-foot shed, 30-foot structure, something that's got some length on it, this thing ought to be straight and level. And if you don't do something with these walls to keep them from pushing out, this in the center is going to sag every time. You start putting using tube of tins for rafters and having a cathedral ceiling, you got to have something to hold these walls the same, keeping them plumb. If not, it kicks them out. So what I usually do, I'm gonna borrow three nails from Mr. Wade. Me personally, the first nail that I put in, I don't put it on the side. I put it on the end. Here on the end, and I'll make sure that this is flush. I don't have my hammer. I won't drive it all the way in, but I put that nail there and it holds that ceiling joist. It's on the line here. I'm not going to nail on the same side as my rafter. I'm going to put two nails on this other side. I'll let Tracy put one in on his end over there and get his lined up. You kind of have to work together too. You have somebody on the other end. Once that thing stabilizes with these two ends, you can put two here. And I'm just going to start these. We're not going to sink this all. I'm not going to sink all this. And I just hit a knot here. There's a huge knot right here, this board. So I put two nails here. So we got three. I just got them stuck in. I haven't sunk on them. I didn't sink the nails up. Then the next thing that I would do, I would probably help Tracy here if I was working with him. I'll let him sit here. And all right, Tracy's got his set. And sometimes, guys, I want you to see this up here at the top. I'm gonna put one nail. Why you can nail me one here?
Straight in this.
You nail it at the bottom, and you nail it straight in. Okay, he put one straight in. I traditionally, that's fine too, because I'm gonna put three in. Actually, one here, here, and here, or right here where Wade's at, and I'm gonna have two more right here. Sometimes too, guys, if you're nailing this up, you can see this one. This is a little bit off here. What needs to happen, and you can see it up here. We haven't got the ends nailed on that very end. But sometimes I'll take an 8 and I'll put it here to pull this seat cut up. Because that seat cut is what makes your rafter tails stay straight. You got one, Lee? You can do it with a 16. And some guys like to use nail guns to do this. Honestly, if I'm up here nailing these rafters, dragging that big hose, unless it's a battery powered, I'd rather have my hammer and my nails. So right here, sometimes if I need to pull this seat cut up, this rafters, and I busted that one right there. Sometimes it'll bust, but I like to put a nail in there. Sometimes you have to pull that up, depending on what you're doing. Sorry about the bust. Dean and Jeff, you can bust me on that one. But here, this rafter, this ridge just needs to be nailed up. I'm gonna put one in, and I'll put some here too, guys, at the very peak of this thing. Then I'll put two on this side and one on this side. All right, so that's basically the way we do this. On the center part, we would have done it the same thing. Over here, we haven't attached these. We need to attach these also. I'll let Tracy put one in at the top up here. We got it nailed at the bottom. All right, Tracy can put one on this other thing. Sorry. Okay, talk a little bit about this thing. And I had Tracy nail that one. And I'm going to take this loose just to show you. Maybe I can get that one out. Tracy, come back this nail out with your hand for me. We just screwed this. I want to show you this on the end piece of it. What I traditionally do, you can use the 2x4 for your deadwood on the ends before I start this. Just like the ceiling joists, I like to come in 1.5 inches, and I like to use the 2x6 out here on the end. I go all the way across the end of my house or whatever I'm building. It gives you plenty of room for your drywall. And then it also gives me something to nail this first rafter to. So I've nailed this 2x6 down. It's 1.5 inches off. So when we go to set these rafters, this thing comes up, and you can use the nail. I'm gonna put the screw back in. I just wanted you to see that. And I know my back's probably to you. You can take 2 nails. I'm just gonna put the screw in. I usually put 2 nails there just to hold it to that deadwood. Then you can set these 2 ends. So that's set. You do the same thing on the other side, and I've got this ridge going the total length of this little structure that we have. Now, can you see me here?
Yes, sir.
This is actually laid out from this end. It goes that way, 16 inch on center. Donnie, we're going to take a few minutes. If you have some questions while we're doing this, just put it in the chat box. I'll try to answer them. I'm going to have them set all these ceiling joists and set all the rafters, and then we're going to talk about the rafter tails and using a 2x6 as a rough fascia and using a 2x4 as a rough fascia, what you have to do to your overhang. And Donnie can zoom in right here. Actually, this one is cut for a 2x4. You can see this. We cut it. It's actually should be on the other side. We can cut another one though. This is for a 2x4. Or I'll leave it. We'll make a mistake on the other side and let the other one hang down for you. You can see why you have to cut it off. This is for a 2x4. You'll look down here on this end. Wade, would you mind handing me a 2x4 before we go any further? Can you still see this right here, Donnie, on this rafter? So when we put this, and if you'll notice this piece here, when you actually put this rough fascia on there, I usually just use a board and I'll slide this rough fascia up before it hits it. It's flush on the bottom. That way your rafter tail's not hanging down. If I use a 2x4 down here on this one, and I didn't cut this off, you see how much of your rafter tail is hanging down. So we have to clip this into this rafter tail. It's pretty easy to clip, and you can do this before you send them up. I'll usually just take a board and I'll do it just like this on the ground, and I'll make me a mark. Right there it is. Then all you have to do in order to mark that I may have to get done and come over here on this other side. I set my square up like that on the end of the board. And you can see here how much you'd have to clip off of that for a 2-4 to work for your rough facing. All right, y'all want to set the ceiling joist? And you can set the rest of them too. We don't have to nail it perfectly. Y'all can do whatever you want to. If you'll nail it out solid like it ought to be nailed, it'll be good.
Dale, do you ever use duplexes? On the, to set right here. That way you don't have to beat it up so much.
Yeah.
You can't hit it.
Yeah. Done. Okay. I'm gonna put that.
You put all four, pick four on one side.
Yeah, I'm gonna put the ones up here.
Grab a couple more.
Guys, a couple things on a big structure that you can do also, especially when we get to the rafters. I'm going to show y'all. I'm going to let them do this here, just to give them some direction. I'll usually set one probably every 10 feet, put 2 of them in, and then we'll go back and we got 2 guys, one at the feet, because you'll have a strong back. You can put some plywood up here on your ceiling joist, whatever you need to do to walk. And then instead of, Tracy, hold up just 1 second. What I would do if I was doing the installation, I'd get Tracy, he just nailed his bottom off over there. Well, if I was building a building or a garage or a house, whatever I was doing, I'd have me some plywood up here by now because I've got a strong back down the middle. I've got my ridge set. I've set one in about every 10 feet just to keep my ridge good and straight. Then I got to fill in with all these rafters. Well, instead of coming on the other side and nailing them, the top part, I'm going to stand on this back side and I'm going to nail right here. I'm going to put 3 nails in this rafter. And I'm going to set the rest of this side. Then I'm going to come back And once they get set, you can take, I don't drive from the other side. I set them from the opposite side. I'll take this nail and put it right beside that, and I'll drive it at an angle into that other rafter, and you're good. You don't have to toenail every bit of this together. That's the way I do that. You may have to put one in the top on that second one, but then I'll nail here to grab it on the other side. I don't know how y'all do that or if you've ever done it, but that's the way I do that. So right here I would have Wade. He'd put 3 in. He don't want to put 3 in right now, but we'll let him put 3 in. So now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to let Wade set his bottom just because we're going to replicate what I'm talking about. Wade, set your bottom right here, if you can. Okay, now you see this up here at the top? Let Donna get over here. Before I have tried, see that is up just a little. A lot of carpenters, they'll let that ride. I don't let that ride. So what I do, on this particular one, I'd have Tracy would be up at the top if he was nailing. He'd come on this side, and even if he gets the nail right there, he just got it down. I didn't even have to nail it. Then I'd go on the other side. You got a nail gun, this works great.
I swapped to a cordless Hitachi. Then you don't have to fight the hose. It's a lot safer.
Yes. It takes some practice, but this I'm just going to show you. Everybody may not like to do it this way. You may want to toenail them, whatever you want to do. It's up to you. You don't have to do it that way. It's just a toenail. There you go. He's got it in. Then I come and those rafters right there look pretty good. So that's what I did. Y'all get y'all to finish setting them. I just wanted to show you that piece of the way that I do that.
There's a comment here that says, deadwood 2x6 on the end is not a cost waste factor because it replaces the ceiling joist, which is maybe a 2x8. So.
Yeah, I use a 2x6 on that end.
You hold it while you get set.
You can actually use we had a comment about the 2x6 here. You can actually use a 2x4. It still gives you about a little over 1.5 inches on the underneath side. Right now, measures. There's 3.5 inches of overhang on this 2x6. You could actually go to a 2x4. Just from having to hang some drywall and other things, when you got that 2x4, it's kind of, sometimes if you don't get it, if you don't put it down beforehand, some of these guys come back and put in the deadwood. They're hard to nail in. They're hard to get, so they bounce a lot. So that's why I use the 2x6. And it also gives you something else to nail your crown to when you get to that. Okay, right here, I just want to make sure. Go ahead, Lee. There would be 2 toenails right here, one here and here. I toenail this thing. This wood, it's old, it's pretty brittle right now too. But toenail here and here.
You got it.
I'm gonna show you what put these two toenails. So you get two toenails here too. I put, you can nail it from the rafter side or you can nail it from the ceiling joist side. I put 3 nails. Show them those 3. There's 3 nails here that I put in this ceiling joist of this rafter also. I've circled them. You can see where I put those. Most of you, I'm sure, have done this, and you have the way that you like to do things. This is just. I'll let them get through nailing it, and then I'll talk to you a little bit more. Anybody have any questions?
Benji Price is watching.
Benji Price on there?
Yeah.
He making a comment?
No, he just said good demonstration.
Did he?
Yeah.
Guys, now I cut some boards for the rough fascia, and I'll show you what I do. I haven't marked them on the one side. But would you get the 36? Let me. All right, guys. I just need to hold that, folks, just for a moment. Traditionally, I have a set of saw horses here. I'm going to done this on my saw horses. All you have to do, especially on a structure like this, I just need to mark one for my overhang. Is that room need to be wrapped? No, up here. I just said this thing's kicking. That board's twisted. Yeah. All right. Yeah, it's twisted bad. Let's start down here at the bottom where they can see where we got our weight. One thing I would do too, guys, this is key to putting up rough faces. Now, I haven't had any look at this, but I want to talk about it. Let me see this board. Let's hold it up just for a second. That board's pretty straight. All right, you need to check the crown, make sure the crown's up. When I'm doing an installation, my kids are terrible about doing this. What they'll do, I've taught them, how to mark off where the overhang. There's 6 inches of overhang, so we move it to the line, and we'll nail it there. Well, what they want to do, and Wade's going to show you there. He uses a spade square. You don't have to have a 2-4. I used a 2-4 a while ago. He uses a spade square. Ricky, do me a favor. Get a drill and just put a screw in it for me. We won't have to drive these now. We'll use some screws here to make this easy, just for a demonstration. Okay, Ricky, come down here just a moment. This is what kids do when you tell them to put on a rough fascia. And this is not the way you put on a rough fascia. They want to come down here to the other end because somebody don't want to hold it, and they'll take their speed square and they'll do this, move it up, put a screw in it. That is not the way we put on rough fascia. If you want your rough fascia, this board's pretty straight, so it may work pretty good. But traditionally, if you're putting on a 16-foot board, it's got at least a 1/4 inch crown in it traditionally. So what you have to do, you put somebody on this other end of this rafter, this rough fascia, and let one person nail. He does the next one, then he goes down, checks the next rafter tail, and we just work our way down that board. You got to work your wood. If you don't, your rough fascia will look like this. Worm, so what you got? This one, the board was straight, so that tells us that we've done a pretty good job cutting our rafters. That's pretty good. I do want to show you a couple things that I do. If I know a lot of y'all would like to use nail guns. If I was building a house for myself, when it comes to my fascia boards and those kind of things, I'd go get me some hand drive, especially if I'm going to cover, this is just my rough, I'm going to cover it up. I'd get me some hand drive spiral 16. That's what I put this board up with. And I'll show you the way that I like to nail them. This way I was taught. Give me 2 nails. Wait. I want to show you the way that I was taught to nail these boards. And everybody wants just to drive them straight in. Well, that's not the way I was taught to nail these boards. The way I was taught by my dad and my uncle, they were master carpenters, to drive this nail at an angle like that. And you're usually on a scaffold board, and you're looking up at this board. So on this next one, it goes up like that. That keeps that board from backing off. On a straight nail, it backs straight out. If you angle those 2 nails, that board won't come off that years down the road. And I use galvanized spiral 16s to do this with. You can do what you want to. You can tell me I'm crazy. It's all right, because I probably am. But this is the way I like to do it. And when you nail those, we just don't nail them straight in. That board will move back and forth. You nail it this way, try to beat it off, especially with a spiral 16 in it. It's not coming off. This is the first thing that goes bad when you're soffit. Most of the time, they get loose, start backing out. These nails even back. If I was putting vinyl on this and had metal fascia, these nails back out all the time. I can see them in fascia boards all the time if you don't have gutters on them.
There was a comment about crowning the rafters, but I think you guys did that.
Yeah, we crowned. I just didn't talk about it.
Right, because you pre-did all that stuff.
Yeah, we pre-did. All the rafters have been crowned. We talked about that. All your crowns go up. If you don't, you'll get a wave like in your roof after you get through. This roof's pretty straight, actually. I looked at it a while ago. It's pretty good. We got one that's down by the 16th right here. This seat cut, that's why it's so important on your seat cuts. You got to be a pretty good saw man. You get off a saw blade, it drops this down. Well, this one's up, and then you cut on the wrong side of the line here, and you cut on the wrong side of the line here, then you cut this one on the opposite side of the line. All of a sudden, you got a 1/4 inch gap right here when you look down your race. It's important to be a good saw man. All right, this is the 2x6 fascia. We didn't have to cut the rafter tails on a 2x6 on a 512. It was perfect. Sometimes you even have to cut them. If it had been a 10-12 pitch roof, you'd have had to cut the rafter tails on these two on the bottom in order to use a 2x6 fascia board. On the other side, we're gonna use 2x4 fascia board. I'm gonna get Mr. Bo to help me here. We're gonna slide this back and Donnie can get over here. And on this side, this time when we do this, we're only gonna attach one end of the rafter.
Okay.
We'll do this with a screws just because keep down the noise.
We'll take you 1/4 inch. Right there is good.
Okay, now just go to the next one way, just like we were going to do. If I was on the scaffold, we'd have somebody down here.
Take it up. A little more. That's it right there. Bring it up. Down here. That's it.
Guys,
Take it
we're going to do
down.
another. Donnie, put the camera. See how bad this, guys, see how bad this is? We got it right here. So if we just screwed this thing to it, this would have been a wreck up here. I'd have made my kids tear it off. I don't let stuff like that go. So Tracy, the crown, we didn't check the crown. That's probably why it's. Yeah, you got it backwards. Oh, he got it backwards to make a point here.
Take it up, Mr. Fudge. Down. Right there. There.
Yeah.
That's good. Good.
Donnie, if you could, can you get a shot where they can see this, how straight this is, this rough fascia is all the way down through here? This is what it ought to look like, guys. That's pretty good. That's straight. If you had a house that's 50 foot long, when you look down it, that's the way it ought to look all the way down through there. If you go to look at most of these houses today, what I see out there, that's not happening. It looks like an ocean. Next thing, the barge rafters. We're going to put up one. It's probably all I'm going to put up. And I'm going to get Eric to get me some screws. It's just the length of your rafter. Check that right there. Here's space one. Right there. That was a little easier than climbing up on the roof. So that's the way that we, if we had notched this, we could have notched this. This is the other side, but it would have been square cut. You'd have drove these nails in. If I'd have wanted to put a stiffener in, I would have come back one rafter and it would nail here, would have notched this out. I'm not going to do a measurement, but I would have notched this out here, down 1.5 inches, and let these 2-4 blocks set in. And I put a nail here, 2 on top, 2 on this other side, and it holds this barge rafter up. Anybody got any questions? If you can look at the video that Donnie's going to publish it or send it to YouTube sometime this afternoon, it'll talk about the estimating the rafter lengths. Tim Elliott's got I've got a sheet that I use with my students that enables them to estimate rafter lengths for different pitches and different widths of buildings or different spans, and it tells you about the run. It's pretty self-explanatory. It works really well. I hope this has helped some of you. If it hasn't, shoot me an email, or you can comment in the box right now if I missed something, or if y'all think I've done something that I should have done differently. You can send that to me also, and we can do it differently. It's just the way that I do things. Anybody got any questions?
Not right now. Is that all we're doing?
Hmm?
Is that all we're doing right now?
Yeah, that was all.
That was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it's 20 minutes till 12. We got a session at 1 with Matthew and Zach to get the SEFCA update. Is that correct? And it's about lunchtime. I'm a pretty big boy and I like to eat.
Good deal.
Mm-hmm.
Just say thanks, and that'll be it.
Thanks, guys. I hope it helps you in your classroom. But these are some of the kind of projects that I use too. If you don't have some of the skills projects, when you've been to the skills challenge, whether it's been the skills challenge, the region or state competition, those competitions is what I use in my classroom. The one at this last year region, I think North Georgia, what is that, Region 1? And Region 3, we used the same competitions for our region this past year. It had a set of steps, a wall frame with a rough opening in it, and then a set of steps. Those are all the three of the things that we've talked about today, and that's basically, if you can do those things, you can build whatever structure you want to do. If you can cut the rafters, if you can build the steps, or do a rough opening and lay out 16 inches on the center. There's not a whole lot more to it, and I know it gets more complicated than that, but that's a really good start for a high school student if you can do that. So I just want to share a few of the things that I do, especially on nailing on rough faces and getting these straight. I hate to pull up to a brand new house and it looks like an ocean down the front of on the rough face. I'm pretty particular about that. There's some other things that I do that I didn't talk about. I usually will pull a string on these. I am going to share this with you. I usually pull a string. I'll hook a string on this rafter tail, or take a chalk line, get somebody on the other end. We'll pull a string and see if these rafter tails are within at least within an eighth of an inch of each other. If they're more than an eighth, I'm going to do something about it. When it gets to be a quarter of an inch, you see it. And check them. If they're wrong, I'll chalk a line across the top, take my speed square, and we'll cut them all up. We might cut them off a quarter of an inch all the way down. Sometimes I'll let these you can let these rafter tails run wild. Just let them hang over whatever after you cut it. You set what you want, chalk your line, you cut them after you put them up, especially on a stick frame. I check trusses too. This is what makes the quality of a job that you have. And I'm all about quality. I like to get things done, and I like to make money too, and I want the kids to make money. But the quality of what you do goes with you no matter where you go to. You do a good job, you'll never have to worry about having a job. People will call you all the time. You do crappy work, and it may be hard for you to get a job. But if you stand behind your stuff and do a good quality job, I'm all about a quality job. But your kids are going to make mistakes. Let them make their mistakes. Over the years, when I first started teaching, it drove me crazy because they would make mistakes, and I wouldn't think they needed to make them. So I started letting them make those mistakes, and then I go back and I show them how to fix them, even like pulling a string if your rafter tails are off. That's why it's so important on these rafter tails to get this seat cup pulled up against your cap plate or your double top plate. You need that thing pulled up. Where I busted that board a while ago, and I probably shouldn't have done that, but I busted the board. You should have. That seat cut needs to be pulled up against this top plate. If you don't, your rafter tail is going to be sticking out some, and then it's going to be short at the top. So your roof's going to look like this. So you need to really pay attention to those things when you're putting your roof system together. And this one actually dropped a little bit too. All right, guys, thank you. Any negative comments are welcome. This is the first time doing a video for me, and even the video that Donnie is going to post, it was my first time, so I hope you enjoy it, but it's good. Guys, thanks and have a great day.